all, in this video we're going to talk about how to write a literature review. So first of all, what is a literature review? A literature review describes existing academic literature related to your paper's research question. It synthesizes and interprets previous results related to your research question. So what is a research question? Well, a research question is the question that your paper asks and answers. For example, when I was writing my thesis, my research question was, can other litigation against a firm be used to create a more accurate measure of a firm's securities litigation risk? So how is the literature review organized? Your literature review should be organized around your research question and should be broken into three parts. One, it should help explain how your research question relates to the existing literature. Two, it should explain what contribution your research question and answering your research question makes to the existing literature. And three, it should explain how answering your research question could affect other literature, including potentially changing the findings of other literature. So let's look at an example, the literature review for my thesis. The research question of my thesis was, to what extent can other litigation be used as a measure of securities litigation? First, my literature review, so consistent with the three different parts of a literature review. First, my literature review helped explain how my research question related to the existing literature, and you guys can see that here. Um, my literature review described other measures of securities litigation risk that were used in the literature. This helps set the stage for how my measure would fit into the existing literature and on what dimensions my measure would be better than the existing literature and on what dimensions my measure would be worse than the existing literature. Second, my literature review explained how my new measure could contribute to the existing literature. Third, my literature review explained how my new measure could potentially change the findings of papers in the literature that use past measures of securities litigation risk and or what the limitations of my measure were. So prior to writing my literature review, I made a table of academic literature relevant to my research question and organized it by topic. On the left-hand side, I included literature that explains how different types of disclosure can affect litigation risk. On the right-hand side, I included literature that explains how different levels of litigation risk can affect disclosure. Right? And so these are 6 different papers that describe how changes in litigation risk affect disclosure. And this is 6 different papers that describe how different types of disclosure affect litigation risk. And so I effectively grouped the literature by topic. Step 1, how my research question relates to literature. Uh, so you can see here it's titled Other Measures of Litigation Risk. And then I say Francis et al. In 1994 developed a commonly used measure of litigation risk that measures the frequency of securities litigation by industry. I then describe what the finding of the paper was. Francis et al. Found that the following industries demonstrate a high level of securities litigation. This measure is used extensively in literature, including in Kasnick and Lev, Skinner, and Johnson. I then say the benefit of the new measure this thesis introduces, that's other litigation, when complemented with the existing measure based on firm characteristics as compared to the measure that is based on industry, is the industry measure is a coarse predictor of securities litigation and by and large does not change over time. Therefore, the industry measure of securities litigation will likely have low explanatory power and may not help explain the effect of litigation risk on firm decision making within the firm. And so this basically shows you I give a description of a paper that has another measure of litigation risk in the literature, and then I explain how my new measure relates to that paper. Step 2, a description of the contribution my research question and answering my research question makes to the existing literature. So here's where I really get into the benefits of my new measure as compared to the existing literature. And I specifically say that it accounts for damages, ability to pay, and liability. And so this I highlight the benefits of my new measure. And so similarly in your paper, you'll want to highlight the benefits that answering your research question provides over the what's answered by the existing literature. Step 3 is the effect answering my research question can have on other literature and or the limitations of my new measure. So in this case, you either will explain how basically answering your research question can change the findings of the existing literature. So for example, if I say, my new measure of other litigation, instead of let's say field it all, they find that disclosure potentially deters litigation, right? But I say, well, this finding was a result of prior measures of litigation, and now in my new measure of litigation, other litigation, I'm actually going to find that disclosure um, potentially increases the risk of litigation, right? And then I'll want to describe why, they found this with the old measure of litigation risk, but now with my new measure, they're actually going to find the opposite result, which is disclosure potentially increases litigation risk. And so that's one example of a way that you could answer step three. Another way you could answer step three is by describing the limitations of your paper. And specifically, I gave the limitations of my new measure other litigation. Okay, so what are some tools you can use to write a literature review? So it sometimes helps to make a chart of the existing literature and then questions answered by previous studies. This can help you find gaps in literature and formulate questions that need further research. So as you guys saw, I actually did exactly that, right? I created a chart of the existing literature and the okay, where can you find literature related to your research question? So some good places to start are Google Scholar and SSRN. And so keep track of the papers you find relevant to your research question in a bibliography. You want to do a search of Google Scholar for Kim and Skinner 2012. And you can see we've already done that here. And sure enough, Kim and Skinner comes up top link. So what we want to do is we want to click on this PDF, and this PDF is going to take us to the paper. And so the PDF is here. And as you can see, this is Measuring Securities Litigation Risk by Kim and Skinner. So now what we want to do is we want to go through this paper and we want to look at the other papers that it cites. And sure enough, Francis, Philbrick, and Shipper, 1984A and 1984B, is a paper of interest to us, mainly because it is another measure of securities litigation risk, different from Kim and Skinner. So now what we want to do is we want to go do a search on Google Scholar for this paper, and sure enough, it comes up top link. But as you can see now, there's no PDF. And so this link is going to take us to JSTOR, and so we click on this link, and we get JSTOR. And so now we can access this paper via JSTOR if we have access to JSTOR. If we don't have access to JSTOR, we can do a search on Google for the paper and then type in SSRN. And as we do that, the first link that comes up is another paper called Earnings Disclosures and Stockholder Lawsuits. And so we're going to click on this, and it's going to take us to SSRN. And specifically, we're going to be able to see the PDF of this paper on SSRN. And so here we are. It took us to this paper, and we want to look at the previous research section of the paper, which is basically literature review. And sure enough, we now have Skinner 1994. We have Kasnick and Lev 1995. We have Francis, Philbrick, and Shipper 1994A. And so, right, that's a couple papers that we would want to take a look at if we're doing a literature review on different measures of litigation risk. And so we have those papers. If you wanted to see basically the citations of those papers, we would scroll down to the bibliography, and we would look for Kasnick and Lev under K. And here it is. If we wanted to find the paper Francis, and yep, that's this, and it's published in JAR. If we wanted to find the a paper by John Coffey on disclosure to analysts are risky, that's that. And so anyway, this bibliography will take you to the full papers. We'll give you the full citations for each paper. So I hope you found this helpful. Is every paper you find on Google Scholar or SSRN made equal? No. Be careful of this. There are many papers that aren't published. There are many papers from less reputable sources. So what you're going to want to do is prioritize papers from top journals. For instance, if your research question is in the area of finance, you should start with papers from the Journal of Finance, the Journal of Financial Economics, or the Review of Financial Studies. And in particular, once you find a paper that's relatively close to yours or right in your area, you'll want to go to the literature review of that paper, and that will be a great source of additional papers that you can cite and learn about. How can you find top journals in your area? Let's say you're not in finance, or let's say you're in accounting, or let's say you're in marketing or something. Use Google Scholar's journal list, which ranks journals by their H5 index. And this is the link here. So just type this into your browser. And then it's currently selected to finance for me, but you can change it to another topic: accounting, marketing, whatever, environmental science, whatever is of interest to you. What is an H index? H index is a metric for evaluating the cumulative impact of an author's scholarly output and performance. And so this is basically how frequently they've been published, and what the impact of each publication has been. A few reminders: be organized around and related directly to the thesis or research question you're developing. This is really critical. You do not want just a list of every paper that's related to your research question. You don't just want a list of every paper in your area. You want it to be crafted in a way that really, as we said, goes through the three steps. One, describes how your research question relates to the literature. Two, what are the benefits of answering your research question? And three, now that you have this, new that now that you've answered this new question, how will that affect the new literature? How could it change the findings of existing papers um, based on your new answer, or what doors could it open? And if you can't find any results that you would change as a result of your paper, you could then put in the limitations of your paper. Synthesize results into a summary of what is known and what is not known. Yeah, so this is what we talked about with the charts or the tables. These are very, very helpful for helping you visualize the literature and break the literature into topics. Identify areas of controversy in the literature. Yeah, so we try to find papers, one group of papers that find one set of results, and another group of papers that find like a different set of results, and the two results are conflicting. And then if you could help sort of explain the conflict between those two groups of papers, that's a great contribution to the literature. And then you could also formulate questions that need further research based on um, your summary of the literature. Right? It gives you a high level view of the literature, and then you can be like, well, here are some questions that need further research. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.